Welcome to the latest edition of the Access All Areas Backstage Podcast. For this edition, we have Melvin Benn, MD of Festival Republic.
From one-off shows to festivals to global tours and events, LMP Group provides insurance for the unmissable. LMP, proud sponsors of this episode with Melvin Benn here on Access All Areas.
Melvin, obviously your career has been probably one of the most impressive in the festival industry, to be quite honest, and there's a lot of things to ask you, so it's difficult to know where to start, to be honest. But let's start back in Hull and the first festival you went to. What was the first major outdoor live event you went to?
So I guess my first festival was Reading Festival, actually, in 1972. Went to see the Faces, and it was in Reading. It started in 71, I'd never been to a festival before. Well, there were very few festivals around, to be fair, so that was myself and one of my mates hitched out down from Hull. I don't think actually neither of us had been outside of Yorkshire at that point, to be honest. So it was a bit of a journey in a way, and we loved it. It was fantastic.
So you can kind of really appreciate what it's like for those. There's a rites of passage for many people that go to Reading Festival.
Yeah, I mean, I went when I was 16. It wasn't a rites of passage at that point, but not at all. In fact, we were by far the youngest people there, I would say, because it was mainly full of older, sort of people that thought they were hippies in the 70s when the hippies had actually really died out in the 60s, but they were still hanging on to it, really. But we just went, and we had no idea. We didn't even take a tent. We didn't. We were 16. We were, 16-year-olds are, the brightest people on the planet, and simultaneously the stupidest people on the planet, and we certainly fell into that category. We didn't have a tent, and it was only recently, actually, recently, 3 or 4 years ago, that, John, my friend, reminded me that actually we slept under the stage. God knows how we got under the stage. But anyway, we got under, because we didn't have a tent, and it was obviously raining. It's always raining. Wow. It was always raining. I then went, to Reading for quite a few years after that. Actually.
Yeah. How was the night's sleep under the stage?
Heavens, I wouldn't remember that, actually. I mean, the great thing about Reading Festival is it involves no sleep, generally, actually. And I think that is one of the joys of Reading Festival, is that, you go there having had a good night's sleep, and you definitely don't have a good night's sleep at Reading, really. You couldn't.
So, I understand that was pretty much one of your first jobs, wasn't it, at Reading, in the festival industry?
Well, actually, no, in fairness. So, I spent, the late 70s and much of the 80s, creating and, political festivals, and, left-wing campaigning festivals, and, things for, anything and everything that was, I suppose, in essence, anti-Thatcher during that period. But, other things like, raising money for, the Stephen Lawrence campaign, and, things like that, where there was injustice. So, within the, and I created lots of political festivals in Battersea Park as part of what was then Battersea and Wandsworth Trade Union Council, and then worked with Ken Livingstone on the GLC festivals that took place in Jubilee Gardens, and then during that period, during the 80s, early 80s, one of the things that we'd started to do was run beer tents to try and fund the free festivals in that sense, and then we created the Workers' Beer Company at the same time to create a company that would raise money for good causes, and stop all of those sort of socialists around at the time that were raising money by putting jumble sales on, and we were raising money by putting festivals on and selling beer, and that seemed to be a much better thing to do, really.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that because obviously, there's quite a long time, it's that decade of putting those kind of events on. What were the kind of, is there an abiding memory from that period that's a particularly, a highlight in terms of, either having a great performance or just really getting a message across politically to a big audience?
I think, one of the abiding memories, I guess, is being attacked by the skinheads on Jubilee Gardens, actually, and then having a running battle all the way with the skinheads, and we'd given Billy Bragg his first big stage opportunity, and I think I can't remember whether it was actually I think it was during a band called the Redskins, who were left-wing skinheads, pretty rare thing at that time, actually, in the 80s, really, but they were left-wing skinheads, and I think it was during the Redskins set that all the sort of the right-wing skinheads attacked the stage, with literally with hammers and sticks and all sorts of things. It was pretty brutal. It was terrifying, and we quite a large number of us had to wade in and defend the band, and then we did get involved in quite a running battle all the way from Jubilee Gardens all the way to Waterloo. So that's a bit of a memory, and I was actually chatting to Billy Bragg about it at Glastonbury last year, actually, and it's very much an abiding memory of his as well, really.
Yeah. So, you set up the festival office in 1989. Can you just talk about how that kind of came together and your first kind of events?
Well, I guess I'd sort of, we'd been running all these all these sort of socialist gigs and left-wing campaign gigs and festivals and things like that, and one way or another, I don't know quite how. I worked really closely with an organisation in Wandsworth called the Battersea and Wandsworth Irish Group, and that was mainly, they were an organisation of Irish people, first generation Irish people in London, and somehow they always had access to the great Irish bands, so it was really good to work with them in that sense, and they always knew who was up and coming and things like that. So, and through them I'd got to know Vince, and we talked about all sorts of stuff, and in the old Mean Fiddler venue in Harlesden, and then the opportunity came to to get involved with Reading Festival because they'd gone bankrupt in '88, and Vince was enthusiastic, but he'd never been to a festival. That summed both Vince up in that sense of it, really. He was sort of like, I've never been to a festival, let's do it. And it's like, I've been to Reading, I was a Reading fan in that sense of it, and but it lost its way during the '80s, and it'd gone astray in that sense, and so we took it on, and so I set up a separate company to Mean Fiddler called the Festival Office at that time, and I rented some space up above the Jazz Cafe in Camden, and then I started to co-produce the Reading Festival with Vince at the same time, and that was great. We had a good time. We had a really good time.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you were involved in a Phoenix Festival and the Flower Festival. There's so many festivals we very fondly, right?
Once we got, we created. Obviously, I got involved with Reading Festival with Vince and I were doing Reading, and then my colleagues in Wandsworth and Battersea, from the Battersea Wandsworth Irish Group. Had the idea that we should create an Irish music festival, and so in that instance, it was us that took that to Vince and said, let's do it together. Rather than Vince coming to me and saying, let's do Reading Festival together, it was the other way around. For the Flower, ironically, him being Irish, it was like most people think it was the other way around. It was actually this way around, and we met in what was, I think, the old George Roby in Finsbury Park, and had a couple of pints and decided to do it, and that was 1990. We created the Flower, and then we created Phoenix Festival as well. We created Tribal Gathering Festival, which was the first legal rave here in the UK, and I think just Mix-Mag or Mix-Mag actually just were commenting on how that was probably the best ever festival that's existed.
Yeah.
And it was extraordinary, particularly the one at Luton Hoo. It was an extraordinary festival, and still great memories about that one. And then we created Homelands Festival and Creamfields Festival, and Creamfields obviously with James Barton, and that was a co-pro between Vince and myself and James Barton, me and Fiddler and James Barton in that sense. So we created that, and then Homelands Festival after that, and we just loved festivals. I think that's probably the thing that people get the impression of me most, is that I do like festivals, really.
Yeah. You're still. I mean, obviously, we go on talk about so much. Can we? I mean, obviously, there was, Leeds was about 10 years after you took over Reading. Is that right?
Yeah, Leeds. Yeah, we took over Reading in '89, and we took over Reading in '89 when it was bankrupt, and there was there was about 8,000 people going, and actually at that time there was about 8,000 people going to Reading and about 12,000 people going to Glastonbury, and that was the festival audience in the late '80s, 20,000 people really. We turned it round in '89. We sold out 30,000 tickets straight away. We were the first people to properly do 2 simultaneous music stages at the same time in the UK, which now people don't think about in any other way, really. And so that was one of the things that we did that very first year, is put 2 stages on, competed with each other at the same time. And then Reading was about 45,000 people, and we didn't think we could make it bigger. Sometimes we are exceptionally stupid, but anyway, we didn't think we could make it bigger because it was, there was a river, a road and a railway line, and Reading Festival takes place in a triangle. And so we created Leeds Festival in 1999, and then had the thought that we, after selling it out and selling Leeds out, having the thought that actually if we built a bridge over the river, we could use a lot of the land over on the north side of the river, which isn't actually in Berkshire, it's in Oxfordshire. But so we built a bridge over the river, and so where we thought we couldn't get beyond 45,000, Reading Festival's now 105,000, and Leeds Festival's 85,000.
So has that been much more complicated, obviously dealing with 2 different councils and everything else?
No, it's not. Not at all. No. It's 2 entirely different teams run the shows. The same talent team book the festival, but 2 entirely different team, operate the shows, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many festivals that we can talk about, but I just wanted to obviously, you kind of rescued and revitalised Reading, which, as you say, initially there were kind of the 2 festivals, and I can remember that time, and the other one was clearly Glastonbury. But Glastonbury was almost a victim of its success. That's the right way of putting it. In 2000, and I was there to witness it, when there were just waves of people climbing, getting over those over those fences, and obviously that was a lot of investment put in and making sure those fences looked very different the next time. But you were instrumental really in helping Glastonbury get its license, and you've been the director of the festival ever since. I mean, how important would you say that's been for you in terms of just satisfaction and your career, really, like helping the team at Glastonbury?
I guess I never really think of myself as having a career, if I'm being honest with you. But Glastonbury is a special place, and Michael and the whole team at Glastonbury, Emily now, of course, got very special values around what the festival is and what it should be, and I love those values. And Michael, I started working with Michael in the early '80s, and on the bars, on the gates, on anything and everything. We were doing anything. We were doing whatever needed to be done in those days. Michael, and stood defending him and his house, from petrol bombs, from the New Age travellers, and that we weren't letting in, and all that sort of stuff. And we had some rough times actually. The '80s were a pretty unpleasant period in the UK. During that Thatcher era, where people became very divided, and it was everyone for themselves in that sense. And so it was pretty difficult. And, we got through it all in that sense. And then, the early '90s, I withdrew from Glastonbury to build all the Mean Fiddler festivals, and the festival, with Vince. And it just became more and more successful, really. And, in 2000, I think it had a license for 80,000 people, and I think the council estimated there was 350,000 people there. And in fairness, people weren't climbing over the fence because there were huge areas where there was no fence to climb over. You could just walk through. And M.I.C.E, at that time did have a sort of philosophy of, well, we've sold all the tickets, so the people should come and enjoy it in a way. And but it was post Hillsborough, it was post Bradford. There was a different emphasis on safety at that time, and M.I.C.E, I think, would say that he was out of his depth in terms of creating that safe environment, really, and not creating the show, because that is his show in that sense, or was his show in that sense. So, he and I met up on the A303 at what was one of the old Wimpeys. You'll remember the Wimpeys. And, he wanted to know whether I was free the Glastonbury weekend to help, really. And obviously it needs an awful lot more time than the Glastonbury weekend. And, that's really where that formal relationship started, where, I became a director of the festival, and I really took on that responsibility of really professionalising the organisation of it, really, and not any of the creative stuff in that sense, really. Michael and Emily have always, kept an eye on that and done that, and the talent buying, they've always kept the eye on that in that sense, and I've tried to put it more into a sort of professional environment, and it really feels strong at the moment within that sort of confines of that. And it I was there yesterday. I'm generally there every Thursday, and we had the big management meeting where all the sort of area organisers were there last night, and big, and it's a really special feeling. And Emily's very much in the hot seat now, really, and Michael takes a more, he's very active around it in terms of his mental activity around it, but physically he can't get around quite so much now. But so he's still around and still very much there. But Emily has picked up that baton really well. Arguably better. Which I do tell Michael, but anyway, because he doesn't believe it, but he's picked it up. Emily's amazing, actually.
I mean, I just wanted to talk about Latitude, because obviously, that seems to me from my distance, it might be wrong, but it seemed quite like your baby in a sense. That was your vision, and bringing, at that point it seemed to have a little bit of hay, and the environment's really beautiful there, and you had the rock bands, you have all sorts of different genres. It was very sort of families kind of cared for quite well there, very well there, and it's just it's a lovely event.
It is. It's a great event, and people often say that, and but I'd say all of the festivals are involved. I'm involved with my babies in that sense, and they're all like my kids. I like them equally in that sense, to be fair, and but no, Latitude, I created Latitude, by chance in Suffolk. Actually, I was going to create it I was intending to create it in Matterley Bowl, down in Winchester. And John Giddens, who runs the Isle of Wight Festival, said he'd kill me if I'd created it too close to the Isle of Wight Festival. And I didn't take him too serious. But, he was pretty pissed off at the thought that I would be so close.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't the right site, and we were looking around, and we found the site over in Henham Park, and it's beautiful. It's perfect for us in that sense, and it helped shape. The park itself helped shape what the festival has become, and but it was that time I'd spent all my life just really concentrating on music, but at the same time separate from the festivals. My cultural life did involve going to galleries and going to book readings, and being interested in authors and films and dance and opera and all, my cultural life had broadened, and Hay was an inspiration. Hay was very much a book festival with an occasional bit of music, and I felt I could turn that on its head and create a music festival with quite a lot of literature and poetry and theatre and dance, and people did think that I was a bit mad, and I was, to be fair. And but I think every sort of festival creator, and there are a lot of festival creators now, I think every single one of them's got a little bit of madness in them, really. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. And but Latitude was a very big move away from from what I'd been involved in the past. But created it in 2006, I think it was, which was actually a fallow year for Glastonbury, and that's why I created it that year, because it gave me that time to spend on it. I'd been thinking about it and sort of creating it in my head for about 3 years before then, but we created it in that fallow year of Glastonbury, and it's proved to be everything I hoped it would be, actually, to be fair. Just literally just today, you may be unaware, but it's National Poetry Day today, and so we've just launched what is year 2 of the Young Poet of the Year with the BBC, and that's a national competition for 7 to 11-year-olds in schools to write a poem, and the winner gets a family ticket for the festival and gets the opportunity to perform the poem on one of the stages at Latitude, and it's become everything that I hoped it would, and it's 40,000 capacity, and it looks solid for another sellout this year, and it feels great, actually. And is it my baby? It's one of the babies, for no question about it. But Reading will always be my favourite festival, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, favourite music festival, let's say that.
Yeah. Just going back to Latitude for a minute. COVID is something we'd all like to forget about, I'm sure, but I don't want to linger there too long. But you did have an absolutely integral leading kind of role, really, in banging on the doors of Parliament to get them to listen to how the live industry and the festival industry particularly were affected. I remember sort of linking that to Latitude just for a personal reason, because it was the first festival that I'd been to once there was any possibility of really being able to go to a festival. I think the first one was obviously, there was the test event before.
I did the test event I did one test event in Liverpool with Blossoms and Liverpool City Council, and that was the first one the government allowed me to do, and that actually was the first one in the world. There'd been some attempts at a couple of things in Germany, but not as a festival as we would know it, where people were able to mix. And so the one in Liverpool was unbelievable. It
seems that everyone in the industry, well, not everyone in the industry, but it seems so many people were there. And so pleased to be there.
It was amazing, actually. And you could feel that sense of relief in a way, or that sense of hope that we could return, because the whole industry, and you hear people, Radio 4 have just been doing, have had a week of reflection on 5 years since, and lots of stuff about theatre and things like that, and that the whole live entertainment industry, music industry, very much part of that is full of people that are active doers. We do things. We're not passive about things. We want to get things done. We love creating things and doing things. And for that whole section of us, COVID was not just a period of isolation, but it was a period where we were being stopped from doing what we absolutely love, which is doing. I did create a system and a plan which they agreed to put into place for the first test event in Liverpool, and I felt I could have done that a year earlier. I think I was a bit stupid to think I could have done it a year earlier, but as I said, we have got that capability of being stupid in a way. So and clearly they weren't listening to me, because they had bigger issues to think about than just getting the music industry back on the road, really. And so the Blossoms event was, the event that I did with Blossoms was the first one, and that. Interesting enough, the real interesting thing about that was that the government they'd done like a snooker tournament in the Hexagon, and they'd done something else and they were funding all of those, but they wouldn't fund the music industry, and I had to fund that, myself. We funded that as Festival Republic, and Live Nation, we funded that, because it wouldn't have happened without that. And then we then created a weekend festival, a camping festival at Download. It was just 10,000 people. And that was the next test event in June. That again, amazing. Bands just overwhelmed to be playing again. And, we had 3 days of music and, 3 days of camping, and it was just extraordinary. I mean, it really was very, very special. And then the government had given me the heads up that I could go ahead with Latitude, but they hadn't actually released all the restrictions at that point. And then, but they had given me the go ahead that I could do it, under the sort of plan that I'd got to, check everybody and things like that. But actually, they lifted the restrictions the week before Latitude, and so Latitude actually went ahead in a period of lifted restrictions, still some restrictions, but lifted restrictions. But clearly I had to get the heads up from government before then, because I couldn't have got it ready in that 1 week really. So that again, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Really. Yeah. But very stressful time, very, very hard work. And, but it did get us all back working, and it got us all back in field, and it got, punters out enjoying themselves again.
Well, exactly. I mean, apart from I was going to use the word euphoria, but that was definitely apparent in the audience Latitude that year. Just seemed so needed for people's mental health.
It really was. Yeah, it really was. And I don't really think about it in the bigger picture sense. Really. I just move on to what is the next thing, really. Otherwise, you start becoming self-important, and that wouldn't be me.
I just wanted to touch on really quickly, because one of the positive things I think coming out of the whole COVID situation was obviously the need, which you were kind of leading from the out. I remember writing away at you and I'll be on phone to you sort of right at the very outset. You were really making a banging the drums, as I say, for the live industry. By the end of it, you kind of had the birth of live, and then after that, which is now representing something like 15 or 16, live industry organizations. Obviously including AOF, concert promoters, association, and everything else. But do you feel? I mean, it seems to me that was quite a positive thing to come out of it. That actually now the live industry seems more set up to be able to speak with a combined voice. Whereas when it started, it was all very scattered, and lobbying government, and you got so many small different organisations trying to get attention. It didn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that we are better positioned to speak to government through live than we've ever been before. So there's no doubt about that at all. And in that sense, it was a positive thing to come out of it. Sadly, we can only speak to the DCMS, who are not the biggest department in government. Obviously, they're the smallest department in government, and so we still don't think our voice is heard sufficient in government. When you think of the, compared to the car industry or the aviation industry, we're not as big. Of course we're not, and, that sort of stuff. But I think when you do think of this sort of combined income that we generate, as well as that social impact, and I think that social impact is underestimated, and there are one or two companies now beginning to. We've always had that capability of being able to do an economic impact study on our festivals, and what it's worth to the economy locally and or nationally. And there are one or two companies now that are beginning to offer the service of being able to assess the social impact. And certainly, would that have ever been given any credence before COVID? No, but certainly subsequent to COVID, that social impact, I think, has got a very material value. And none of us are really exploring that material value properly yet, but we'll learn to do so. That social impact value, we'll learn to do that in the next 10 years. And again, I think that will be appreciated, because you mentioned it earlier, Chris, that that coming out of COVID and the sort of assist of being able to go and commune with people around a festival or concert or whatever, that everybody's like-minded and all of that sort of stuff. It is really good for people's mental health. It genuinely is very good for it. And we need to learn to assess how important that is, so that, again, we can speak to government about that particular issue, because we're not doing that yet, and we should be.
And it does seem as well, when you talk about the sort of social impact, that it does, festivals almost offer people a alternative world, or a different way of living and communing with other people in a positive way. And obviously they're often brought together by the same artists that they want to see there and everything else, but they're living in a different way, living on the canvas, they're getting a lot less sleep and all the rest of it. But when it comes to kind of having those people there in probably very positive mindsets largely, I guess there's that opportunity, isn't there, to sort of to encourage better behavior in the long term. So I'm thinking about things like sustainability. Obviously, you were running events to push to help get a political message across. In which I know you've done a lot of work with sustainability. We were talking about that earlier on, the Green Nation scheme and everything else. Do you find much opportunity to kind of educate, I suppose, if that's not too patronising a word, the attendees to your events?
I think educate is probably too patronising a word in that sense, really. But I guess, I've been measuring my carbon footprint of all of my festivals since 2007, 2008. So, for quite a long time now, well before everybody else started doing it, and, banned plastic straws, banned, plastic cutlery and things like that, long time before it became fashionable to do so, really. But, but nobody was, 2008, slightly before 2008, the sort of green agenda was really beginning to hot up. 2008, 2009, the economic downturn came, the crash came, and the green agenda fell off a cliff because people were just focused on the economic agenda in that sense. And and then, it built up again. And 2017, I wrote a sustainability charter for Live Nation Europe, that became a global sustainability charter. And, Vicky Chapman, in my office was my sustainability manager from that point. I'd actually had a sustainability manager from 2008, employed all the time. It was 2 or 3 different people, but, Vicky was the one in place at that time. And we got the policy that we'd written there adopted as the global policy, and part of that is education, being vocal about it in that sense. And it's not really about education in that sense, but it's about doing the right thing. And I stopped putting politics in my festivals from 1989 onwards. Of course, everyone's politics always influences how they behave, what they do, etc. And that still happens with myself, of course. But overt politics are not in any of my festivals in that sense. But the green agenda is very definitely there. And is it our responsibility to influence others in that? To a degree. I think Glastonbury does it better than anybody. But I think at all of my festivals, I push it very hard. But I think I'm also pushing it very hard because the audience expect me to push it very hard. So I think it's a two-way street. I don't think it's me pushing on them. I think they're pushing on me equally in that sense. And they want me to be responsible. And I think I've got a duty to be responsible. And in fairness, I think every business should have a duty to be responsible. And actually, one of the amazing things now, and we have, I was just sat, with Vicky Chapman, the sustainability manager, last week, and, she was talking about how much time the corporate auditing of our carbon footprint and our sustainability takes of her business life now, of her work life. And of course, it's very dry because you're measuring carbon footprint, you're measuring your versus the previous year, etc. It's really dry stuff. But I was saying to her, isn't it fantastic that we've got to that point now where the shareholders actually really want to know that we're doing better this year than we were last year for the environment. And as dry as that is, in terms of an audit, it's absolutely bloody amazing that they want us to be better. I think it's fantastic, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of presentations by Vicky, and it's always been pretty impressive stuff that they're doing across the board there. I just wanted to talk about. I don't want to go back to the COVID thing again, but the legacy of that. There's been something like a 30% uplift in costs, and you've seen everyone in the live industry to some extent. I say everyone to some extent, it's a bit of a contradiction there, but there's you've got the big stadium tours coming in. You've got the big must attend festivals like Glastonbury, but there has been a change in buying behaviour as well as the rising costs. So have you been sort of hit that hard by those kind of challenges? I mean, obviously you've been doing festivals for such a long time. I'm sure you know how to kind of find efficiencies and everything else, but how much of a challenge, I suppose, have those two things really been post-COVID?
Massive challenge, really. Yeah, I mean, huge. It's. I don't think, and I think I can speak on behalf of the whole industry. I don't think people could fully appreciate just how hard those rising costs have hit us. Where Festival Republic is part of Live Nation, which is a stock market listed company. They're very hands off in terms of what you're doing. If you want to do that, go and do it, but make sure you deliver for us. And that's on my head. It's on the chairman, Dennis Desmond's head. We're very much tasked with that. So those greater efficiencies of being able to buy across multiple shows do help. Unquestionably, they help. But it's a massive challenge because we all want to keep our ticket prices as low as possible.
Yeah.
Artist costs are going up because their costs are going up. Renting a tour bus, renting a lighting rig, renting a sound, everything's gone up for the artist, so that gets passed on to us. We have to pass it on to the customer, or try and get better efficiencies so that we don't have to pass it on to the customer. And it's fair to say that my chairman, Dennis Desmond, is really good on keeping a keen eye on that now, actually. And, I applaud him for it because it needs to be done.
And in terms of, I guess, there's a lot of talk about Generation Z and how to kind of effectively market them and that their buying behavior is slightly different and their expectations maybe to some degree is maybe slightly different at events. Would you say that's connected with the way that you're revitalising and investing heavily in the kind of campsite experience at Reading?
Yes, no, very much so. Yeah.
It seems like a very much focused in kind of enhancing.
It is, yeah, very much so. I mean, in fairness, I think the campsites haven't changed since I first went to Reading in 1972, really. And no, it is. It's wanting to provide a better experience for people that won't come unless we do provide that better experience. Historically, we have always offered that better experience, but at a premium via the sort of premium campsites and the glamping and the upgrades and things like that. But I really wanted to, still offer that, but offer something in between a basic camping and that, with better toilets, better showers, and also with more segregation of who your community might be, whether that be an eco community, whether it's a quiet and calming community, etc. So yes, very much. There are new people that want to come to festivals that won't come to festivals, I think, unless we start enhancing that experience. And I've never been afraid to enhance an experience because that is what the customers want.
Absolutely. I would love to talk to you all night, but we've got to go and present an award in a minute. So just one last question. Obviously, we've seen lots of there's lots of conversations about the fact that there's been, quite a lot of independent festivals have fallen through have been postponed or cancelled or whatever in the last few years because of costs and everything else. So it's a difficult time, but a lot of people say it's never been an easy time to set up a festival. There's always challenges. And there's a kind of natural wave sometimes where you get massive saturation in the market and then things move down again and new events come through. How do you kind of I guess it is always it's a challenge bringing a new event to the market. So my question is, I suppose, as someone that's got so many years of experience in the industry, what would your kind of key piece of advice be to a budding festival promoter that's just sort of trying to get something together at maybe a small scale off the ground for the first time?
Well, either be stupid or be afraid. I think, and I think most of us, and many of the independent festivals, as they're called, and I don't consider myself to be non-independent in that sense of it. I'm part of a big structured company, but I don't get a call from Michael Rapino telling me, which festivals to do and which festivals not to do, who to book, how to do it. It's not like that in that sense. And but I think we all start with an element of, it's a bit stupid to do this, but let's have a go. And I certainly wouldn't want to discourage that. I think for me, I've always had that one thought that you need to be able to afford to pay people if you lose money. And that's the overriding concern for me, because, people deserve to be paid. I come from a socialist background, and I believe people should get paid for their labour in that sense. And it's, don't take risks with other people's financial income in that sense, really is a core thing. But have a go, absolutely have a go. I wouldn't dissuade anybody from having a go. It's not my style, and the more the better. I do love festivals. I wish I could have patented every single one of them, so but I wasn't able to do that. I love festivals, and the more the merrier for me. And I think the more festivals there are, the better every festival becomes, because it has to compete to stay in the race and stay in the game. But festivals don't have a right to exist, Chris. And people say lots of independent festivals have gone, but a lot of my festivals don't exist anymore. Tribal Gathering doesn't exist. Homelands doesn't exist. Phoenix doesn't exist. We don't have a right to, to keep something going. If the customer and the public don't want it, they don't want it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.